So welcome. So welcome everyone to our next session of Engaged Buddhist Speaker Series. And today we're very happy to welcome Dharma teacher Mitchell Ratner, who is been a Dharma teacher in our tradition since 2001. And he's, I think, come to Plum Village since the early 90s or even before. And was a longtime OI member, and he founded the Stillwater Mindfulness Practice Center in near Washington, D.C. I think it's in Maryland, actually, and has been very engaged in how to continue our teacher as a kind of revolutionary for peace, and how to address some of the most difficult issues that we've faced today. I know I was very moved by how his Sangha responded to the recent violence in the Middle East, and opening discussion sessions, and really looking deeply into it in the spirit of Thay's fearlessness of addressing issues of war and peace in the world. And so we're very grateful to have Mitchell with us today. And so I'll pass it on to him. Oh, unmute yourself, Mitchell. Yeah.
Dear Thai, dear brother Fapalu, dear sister Chong Kong, everyone, boy, I don't get to see many people on my screen right now, but thank you all for coming tonight. Unfortunately, I'm in the middle of a cold, and so I may be doing some coughing and don't quite have a full deck of cards, but I'll do the best I can. One of the things that impressed me over the years is unless Thai was in the hospital, he would give his Dharma talks. It was really rather remarkable. I mean, he would be running a high fever and he would do it. Here I am. So I am an old timer that in 1989, I was in Thailand for some work. And because of a schedule change, had a week free. And earlier in my life, I'd been interested in Buddhism and went off to a very famous retreat center in Thailand called Suan Mo, led by a teacher named Ajahn Buddhadasa. And that 1 week there just changed my life. And the key part was that the mind I was used to having didn't have to be the mind that I always would have. That it really, things settled and all sorts of magical things started happening. So I came home and went to some retreats in various places, and then decided I wanted community here in Washington, and started sitting in 1990 at the Yakwan Buddhist Temple in Washington, D.C., which is about 10 minutes from my house. And at the time, there was a resident monk there, Vietnamese monk, who was just beginning to develop his relationship with Thích Nhat, that he was also a Zen monk from Vietnam, but they were in sister traditions. That was Thai Yak Tan, who eventually became the abbot at Deer Park. And as things turned out, I started, I don't know, in the spring there, and in December, Thai was coming to town to be part of a conference called the Common Boundary Conference. And so I went to the retreat, went to a day of mindfulness at the Vietnam Memorial, and was invited to have tea with Thai with a few people from the community in Washington. And at that tea, Thai asked me to organize a retreat in Virginia for 250 people 6 months later. And I agreed. And then at that retreat, I asked Thai what next. And he said, come to Plum Village. And I was all in. And it's hard to describe how important I thought being with Thai was. It was as if I had a spiritual illness. I had an illness, and the very best doctor in the world for that is getting the best result happened to be in Australia. I would find a way to get there. I mean, if it was life-threatening, for sure. And that's how I felt about Thai, that it was just really important for me that he had something specifically to say to me that was very, very important. And this sort of boggles me a little. Somehow I convinced both my wife and my employer that would be a good idea for me to attend the winter retreat for 3 months in 91 and 92. Became an OI member in 93, Dharma teacher in 2001. And I started teaching, sort of, but it was pretty intimidating. I was trying to figure out how to do it, how to be a Dharma teacher. And then I came across, let's see here, this quote from a poet named Theodore Roethke. Very simple quote. A teacher is someone who carries on their education in public. And that really spoke to me. I could do that. I could carry on my education in public. I didn't have to be right all the time. I didn't have to be perfect. I could use the Sangha to help me get better. And so that's what I've been doing for lots and lots of years. And that's what I'll do tonight. And I want to start with a little bit of a guided meditation to settle us down and to work a little bit with our habit energies. So find a comfortable place to sit. I'll invite Three Bells to start us off. Breathing in, I am aware of breathing in. Breathing out, I am aware of breathing out. So we begin by focusing 100% of our attention on our breath, aware that as it comes into our body, there's a little turnaround, and aware of it as it comes out. And letting go of everything else. When the mind wanders, simply come back to the breath and to this present moment. you're feeling rather scattered, distracted today, then staying with the breath meditation may be helpful. And if you're feeling settled, feel free to extend your exploration of the present moment to your body, to other parts of your body, your feelings, your emotions, your mind states. Or your sense awarenesses, sounds, smells, sights, but staying in the present moment. Hmm. Now I invite you to come back to your breath for a few moments. Clear out wherever you've been. Breathing in, I'm aware of breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware of breathing out. Um, and I would like you to bring to mind some of the wholesome habit energies that you have developed as an adult, especially those that have been nourished by your mindfulness practice. Love, compassion, authenticity, kindness, presence, calm, ease, diligence, attention, clarity, generosity, or any other ones. And as you've made your little list of, that's one that you've developed, doesn't to perfection, but developed some, pick one. Pick whichever one seems to have some energy for you at this moment. And now I invite you to sit with it, welcome it, and just feel it in your body if you can. What does compassion or love, kindness feel like to you? Where do you feel? Is it all over your body in one place? Is it a color? And then I want you to talk to it and ask, why are you present in my life now? What happened? What is it I do, or what are the circumstances that have allowed you to be more present in my life? There's no right answer. Just ask the question and see what arises from your storehouse consciousness. And then the final question is there a way that this particular wholesome habit energy can be of benefit to you and others as we confront the many challenges of our time? And now I would like to ask uh, Sarah to break everyone into groups of 3 or 4 people. And when you get into your group, give your name and where you are geographically. And then, was there something you learned or that surprised you in this short guided meditation? And you'll have 10 minutes. And so you can take a minute or two for each person and go around. And then if you have more time at the end, just keep going around. And if being in a small group is not something that sounds like fun to you, it's fine to stay in the main room and your group will just be a little bit smaller. So Sarah, can you break us into small groups? And then end at 10 minutes after you started it. ask questions,
Sure.
to make a comment, or just to make it a little bit more, to have more voices, and to, well, here I am carrying on my education in public, so I need some. Okay, so where I'm going to start is how, over the years, my way of looking at what Thay was teaching and what is engaged Buddhism has changed. And I learned a lot actually preparing for this talk. And so I went to Plum Village for the first time in 91, 92. And then I went back for half of the winter retreat in 94 and 96. And I believe it was in 96, the theme was basic Buddhism. And at the end, there was something Thay called a Dharma festival. There were only like 60 people there. And Plum Village was small in those days. And every person attending, lay or monastic, was assigned a topic that he had covered. And you had like 5 minutes to talk about it. And then he would critique what you said. And I got the 4 Brahma Viharas. And let's see. I was thinking of them as 4 different things. The 4 abodes of the wise one, and sort of treated them all separately. What was the essence of each is the way I would approach it. And then in thinking about it and talking with others, I realized it could be done from another perspective of inner being, and could imagine it more interactively. And so I presented something like this to Thay, and he really liked it. I mean, he thought it was cool to sort of deal with all the interactions here and how each element is in the other element. And I thought it was cool too, and then I went 3-dimensional. That this is a 2-dimension figure, but you can, let's see if I can get this to play. You could actually do it in 3 dimensions. And you had these 4 facets, so it was just one thing, but through 4 different windows. All right, stop going around. Oh, not yet. Well, and I thought that was really cool, and started converting a lot of the numbered things into polygons, and that's the one I just showed by mistake. That the next one, that I never knew, but there's in the Tang dynasty, there were 14-sided die. And anyway, imagine this as the 14 mindfulness trainings with 14 facets, and just one thing. It was one path, one practice, but it had 14 ways of looking at it. And so that's where it stood for a while. And then I was asked last year to talk about Engaged Buddhism at Blue Cliff. And I used a faceted stone to explain the many ways to look at Engaged Buddhism, and that I wanted to talk about a few that were important to me. And so that's my Blue Cliff Monastery facet. But as I was talking about this talk, when I was thinking about this talk, something was bothering me. And I remembered a line from a really interesting book called How Buddhism Began: The Conditioned Genesis of the Early Teachings by Richard Gombrich. And he wrote in the introduction, Karl Popper has warned against essentialism. He has shown that knowledge and understanding do not advance through asking for definitions of what things are, but through asking why they occur and how they work. And I was intrigued, and I did a deep dive down a rabbit hole trying to learn more about Karl Popper. mid 20th century philosopher of science. And this is sort of a table that sets up the difference between the two. And that essentialism is that concepts are underpinned by a fixed essence that determines identity, that things have rigid, permanent essences. And nominalism is the idea that concepts are mental constructs that reflect social and linguistic conventions. Nominalists believe there are no universal essences in reality, and so on. The essentialism is permanent and static. Nominalism is impermanent and changing. Separate self-entities, no separate self-entities. One truth. The Newtonian physicists believed their theories reflected how the universe operated. And it was the early 20th century is when, with relativity and quantum mechanics, they realized there are many ways of understanding. And it's important to what Popper called conjecture and refutation, that to be able to, somebody puts an idea about, and other people try to refute it or say it's not how things work. And that's how science advances. But and let me just say something about this too, that I was thinking about the famous Indian parable about the elephant and the five blind people. And it's sort of, okay, all the blind people get just a part of the elephant and think it's the whole thing. But underneath that is something essentialist, like there are essential elements of an elephant, and those of us who aren't blind can see them. So it retains some essentialism, as opposed to, well, in addition to the blind men, you can have elephant trainers, elephant veterinarians, evolutionary biologists looking at elephants. And out of their interest and training and the questions they're asked, they're each developing a different notion of a different way of understanding elephants. And that's all fine and good. And so back to these two questions, that the essentialist says, what's the definition of engaged Buddhism? What's the essential qualities? And the nominalist says, how did engaged Buddhism come to be? And how does engaged Buddhism work? Let me stop share for a minute. And I realized that I've been thinking in nouns, and I needed to think in verbs. And rather than facets, I needed to be thinking in processes, in mechanisms and actions. And I struggled with this. What's a word I could use if I didn't use facets? Forces, processes, mechanisms. And then it hit me. Actions and their consequences are at the very heart of all Buddhist traditions. And it's called karma. Let me put this up. Oh. And broadly, the principle of karma is that our intentions and actions condition our future and the world's future. And Brother Thoplu, can you read these two quotes for me, please?
So this is a Q&A from Thai. And somebody asked Thai, you never speak of karma, why not? And Thai answered, I speak of karma all the time. There is no moment when I do not speak on karma. Karma means action. The action can be in the form of a thought or the form of a word, or it can be in the form of a physical action. So when I speak about mindful breathing, that is good karma. Mindful breathing is good action to bring your body and mind together so you can be there in order to touch life deeply. When I speak about the 5 mindfulness trainings, I speak about karma because karma is action. If you think, if you speak according to the spirit of the 5 mindfulness trainings, you will get good results. Peace, joy, and happiness will be yours. I do not use the word karma, the technical term, but I always speak of karma and the fruit of karma, which is karma pala, and also good karma and negative karma. And this quote from Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet: our actions are an energy that has an effect on ourselves and on the world. They are our product. They are our rain, our snow, our thunder, and lightning. In Buddhism, the word for action is karma. It is a very important term.
Thank you, Brother Faplu. So from there, I started figuring out, okay, what are the questions? Well, how do we approach this whole question of how does engaged Buddhism work? And came up with a bunch of questions. Let's go back to how do specific karmic actions help us to mature as engaged practitioners? How do specific karmic actions help us to taste joy, liberation, and freedom? And how do specific karmic actions help us to be effective in relieving suffering and offering peace and joy to others? So I'm going to, in a few minutes, turn to those questions or discuss some teachings from Thai that have to do with karmic actions and engaged Buddhism. But let me stop here for a second and ask Brother Faplu whether there's any thoughts on all this.
Yeah, I appreciate the movement from kind of essentialism to understanding the underlying causes. And I was reflecting a bit on the, historical and ultimate. So it's, essentialism, we say, it's this sense that, this is that and that is this and so forth. And then looking deeply into, the historical dimension of life and everything we experience, we see that there's actually nothing really there. And so I'm curious to, for me, that is engaged Buddhism, basically, when you move beyond this kind of name and form and just look at really what's happening. What is actually going on within and around us, which is the basic mindfulness practice that Thai's always training us in. So yeah, I'm curious to see where you're going to bring it.
Well, since you raised it, let me jump to something that's pertinent. So Karl Popper was a historian, philosopher of science. And science, as he saw it, was all about public knowledge. And, you had a finding, a measurement or whatever, a relationship. And then other people criticized that, or, if they could, refuted it, that it doesn't work that way. And so it was all about knowledge. And as you said, that Buddhism works on the both the historical and the ultimate dimension. And so in the historical dimension, there's a certain amount of this. When I was just coming to Plum Village, for some reason, I got this idea in my head that Thai had been ordained as a Japanese Zen monk because he was called a Zen monk. And somehow during this occupation of Vietnam by Japan, he had been involved in Japanese Buddhism. that's totally wrong. But, how we make inferences in the historical dimension, the same way, if trying to understand what the Diamond Sutra is actually saying, I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful commentaries on it that take different perspectives and apply it to different situations. But where in the ultimate dimension, which is different than science, what's important is using the knowledge to develop insight in the ultimate dimension, and to go be, and to get a sense of what the ultimate dimension is the ultimate, is the real go, to really see, to understand what Indra's net is, to understand how the extent of interbeing. And I would say about scientists that they oftentimes, if they were quantum physicists, were really good at understanding the interbeing out there, but didn't apply it to their own lives.
Right.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Okay. So I want to talk about karmic actions, and I have 5 of them. It's just sort of ways that karma unfolds with Engaged Buddhism. And I guess so the first one I call embodying the practice, cultivating presence throughout our day. And that I, like the Buddha and the early Mahayana teachers, had a deep understanding of the prevailing spiritual illness of his time, and combined that with that understanding with a plan for treatment. And so the term engaged, Thay talked about engaged Buddhism being his way of being in the world in his practice. And there's this quote here from a talk in Hanoi in 2008. And Connie Anderson, if you would unmute yourself and read it, I would appreciate it.
Sure, happy to. A talk from 2008. When we speak about engaged Buddhism, we speak first of a kind of Buddhism that is present in our daily life at every moment. When people hear about engaged Buddhism, they think of fighting for social justice, fighting for human rights, organizing demonstrations, and so on. But that is not true. That is part of the practice, but not the basic part. The basic part is to have the practice alive in every moment of your daily life. You should be there in order to attend to what is happening in the here and now, in the realm of the body, the realm of the mind, the realm of the environment.
Thank you, Connie. So that's, as Brother Fapalu was saying, of attending to the realm of the body, the mind, and the environment. The key thing here is that is so common, as he was saying when the quotes about karma, is that we can change the world by changing ourselves. We can learn to calm ourselves in all situations. We can learn to respond more and react less. We can notice when our daily actions create ill will rather than goodwill, separation rather than connection. We can become willing to lean into the inevitable conflicts that enter our lives and work towards reducing or dissolving them, even while recognizing that we will not always be successful. So that's one element. And let's so karmic action true. 2, nourishing our compassion, recognizing and responding to the suffering of others. And Thai is pretty feels strongly about this. And there's a wonderful quote in Peace is Every Step that Eric Donaldson, if you're available, can you read it? There's 2 slides.
Yes, happy to. Thai writes in Peace is Every Step, mindfulness must be engaged. When I was in Vietnam, so many of our villages were being bombed. Along with my monastic brothers and sisters, I had to decide what to do. Should we continue to practice in our monasteries, or should we leave the meditation halls in order to help the people who are suffering under the bombs? After careful reflection, we decided to do both, to go out and help people, and to do so in mindfulness. We called it Engaged Buddhism. Mindfulness must be engaged. Once there is seeing, there must be acting. Otherwise, what is the use of seeing? We must be aware of the real problems of the world. Then, with mindfulness, we will know what to do and what not to do to be of help. If we maintain awareness of our breathing and continue to practice smiling, even in difficult situations, many people, animals, and plants will benefit from our way of doing things. Are you massaging our Mother Earth every time your foot touches her? Are you planting seeds of joy and peace? I tried to do exactly that with every step, and I know that our Mother Earth is most appreciative. Peace is every step. Shall we continue our journey?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eric. This is a slide about how living our lives as engaged practitioners, but also how it develops over time. So I was trying to think about this. How does this work? And so many of us start out disengaged and indifferent and burdened by greed, hostility, and confusion, which are the 3 poisons. And you can start either way. I mean, you can start with mindfulness in daily life, which develops presence, insight, and clarity, or mindful social action, which develops compassion and, importantly, reduces self-centeredness, because ego is such a problem on the path. And most people, I mean, you bounce between these 2, that you do this for a while and that for a while, or at the same time. And over time, it matures and you're learning things. And at the other end, over time, that you're feeling more engaged and connected, and from time to time, tasting peace, joy, and liberation. And that's a path that I think is not unusual among practitioners who have been around for a while. And let me come off that and ask my brother here, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I really value the presentation on gradual practice. There's a sense that, like this, Tai often talked about like sudden and gradual, right? There's in Zen there's that tradition. So sudden, right now you can wake up, you can be aware, and there is the path of cultivation, which grows, and it really does. And I would also add that it's, I think you have built into there the path of ethics, which I think is one, the 5 mindfulness trainings and 14 and so forth, and our precepts as monastic, which is, I think, often we forget that is also the foundation of our meditation practice, and our compassion grows with ethical training.
Thank you. So let me do the next one. I've got 5, so we've only got Another important part is cultivating non-attachments to views, observing and learning from the life that is within and around us. And, it's really surprising to me how much Thai meshes with Karl Popper. And during the 1940s, in the middle of World War II, Popper wrote a book called The Open Society and Its Enemies. And it's very much in line with the first three of the 14 trainings. And I think it's clearly expressed in the second of the 14 mindfulness trainings. And Gwendolyn Sato, would you be willing to read this for me?
Yes. The second mindfulness training, non-attachment to views. Aware of the suffering created by attachment to views and wrong perceptions, we are determined to avoid being narrow-minded and bound to present views. We are committed to learning and practicing non-attachment to views and being open to others' experiences and insights in order to benefit from the collective wisdom. We are aware that the knowledge we presently possess is not changeless, absolute truth. Insight is revealed through the practice of compassionate listening, deep looking, and letting go of notions rather than through the accumulation of intellectual knowledge. Truth is found in life, and we will observe life within and around us in every moment, ready to learn throughout our lives.
And the fourth one I want to talk about is building Sangha, going as a river, and learning from each other. And Rachel Sweetala, please, are you willing to read this one for us, please?
Yes. Thai writes in Interbeing, building Sangha is our most noble task, and our first step in building Sangha is to become part of a Sangha, whether it has already been founded or whether we found it ourselves. We all need a Sangha to support our personal practice and transformation. Sangha flows like a river so that we do not evaporate as an individual drop of water. The world needs spiritual communities because they contribute a collective energy of peace to the world. In the context of a Sangha, we have a very good opportunity to realize no self. We understand that no individual becomes enlightened. Enlightenment is collective. The Sangha is the environment in which we develop brotherhood and sisterhood and can care for each other as brothers and sisters of the same family.
For a long time, and Thai often would talk about the 14 mindfulness trainings and say anybody can practice the 14 mindfulness trainings. It's open to everyone, they're great. But if you wanted to be an Order of Interbeing member, you had to commit to being a Sangha builder. And many of us who have worked with Sanghas over the years have realized how challenging that can be. I mean, there's so many skills in terms of resolving conflicts and getting things organized and working with people. And sometimes it feels like being in a rock tumbler where, I mean, it's wonderful, but and you're getting all your rough edges smoothed out, but it's not easy all the time. One more. Karmic action 5, cultivating joy, offering peace and joy to others. One of my favorite short definitions of mindfulness from Thai, I heard in one Dharma talk, which is that mindfulness is the celebration of life in the present moment. And he's so insistent on that practice should be joyful. And this is a quote from talk at Plum Village in 1998. And Susan Hay, can you read it, please?
Sure. The joy of others is my own joy. That is the wisdom of the Buddha, of interbeing, of interconnection. Happiness is not an individual matter. If you are joyful, the other is also joyful. If others suffer less, you also suffer less. The happiness of others is my own happiness. And I vow to bring a lot of joy in my spiritual path. In my path of service, I know that every word, every look, every act, and every smile can bring a lot of happiness to people. I know that if I diligently practice, I myself will become a source of peace and joy to the person I love and to all living beings. That is the Samantabhadra vow.
Thank you, Susan. Often Thai says so many things, and he often says it in different ways. And sometimes they don't agree with each other. And, or it seems that way. And I used to think that was a bug, but now I'm beginning to think it's a feature, in that he's trying to see these things from so many sides, and sort of like this multifaceted stone. I mean, in the sense that there's so many ways to see things, and that there's not just one way, and have to get out of that essentialist framework that there's only one way to talk about it. But that's my 5 karmic actions. Let me stop for Fat Blue for a moment here and go on.
Sure. So I appreciate this. I like we start with the body, embodying the practice, and I think that's key to bring the Buddhism down to a present moment thing that we do in our daily lives, and that's key. And then the aspect on cultivating, nourishing compassion, non-attachment to views, growing the Sangha, and the joy element. I mean, Mitchell, in a lot of the traditional monasteries, the monastics have a threefold. They practice, they work, and they study. But Thai added a fourth one, which is play. And he insists that, we used to go to the Hermitage on monastic day, and we'd do walking meditation in silence with Thai. And then Thai would pick up a volleyball and throw it to one of the nuns. And then he wanted to see the monks and nuns playing volleyball at the end. So I think that it's key that, and this is often missed, that the joy be always present in engaged Buddhist practice. I think if you remove the joy, it's not engaged Buddhism.
Joy, his joy was so powerful too, that when I first got to know him back in 91, actually went to a retreat in California, and I just enjoyed watching him walk, that there was sort of a bounce to his walk that just made me smile. So let me conclude in maybe open it for some questions, but conclude by saying, well, okay, what do I do? And just start by saying, early on, I learned from Thai that what he was teaching was a 24/7 practice, not something we just do 7 to 9 p.m. one day a week, not something we do when we're on a 10-day retreat, but it's 24/7. And that's both harder than being in a structured environment, which I'd been in Vipassana and Zen, and also much more powerful because it was portable. You could take it home. And the other thing I want to is that as I said about karma, that our actions arise out of and influence the collective consciousness. And he said at one point, I'm paraphrasing, that we get the society and the leaders we deserve. And to have better leaders, a better society, we have to change the collective consciousness. And I believe that teaching mindfulness and building sanghas can do that. I mean, it's not immediate and it's not flashy, but it's changing people's minds and putting new elements into the culture. And I think what's amazing to me is how in the 34 years that I've known Thai or been part of Thai's practice, how it's grown. So much of the language has become part of a wider circle. But what I do a lot right now is Sangha building or Sangha maintaining. And the short, I could give you a long story, but the short story is that what began as a few people sitting in an attic of an acupuncture center in 1993 grew to become a network of Sanghas, which we call the Stillwater Mindfulness Practice Center. And we do a lot of things. We have groups that meet about 15 times each week, morning sitting, evening sitting, Spanish-speaking group, newcomers group, a group in a senior center, mindful art group. When we can, we offer deepening our practice events, retreats, workshops, and classes for experienced practitioners. Periodically offer companions for the journey group, online and in person, which are small groups that continue over 3 or 4 months, sharing about their lives and listening to each other. Just 4 or 5 people for an hour and a half or 2 hours at a time. Oh, maybe 5 years ago, we started an ending racism book group for facilitators. Figured we needed to get the facilitators on board, and we have, because of all our groups, we have about 50 facilitators. And we don't have, it's only about 15 or 20 in the group, but it's really been important for me and many other people. And somehow, wanting to get the word out, wanting to make it accessible to everybody as easily as possible, both when we were in person and then when we came online and as we gradually get back, was really part of sort of the Stillwater way. And so we started sending out weekly announcements on the Thursday evening Dharma topic and other notices from the community. And it now goes out to more than 2,000 practitioners around the world. I mean, we get people signing up from Ecuador and Afghanistan and, all sorts of places, Germany, Australia, because there aren't many ongoing sort of Dharma topics about lay practice. That so much we get from them, which is wonderful, from the monastics, but it's almost always, aside from this tonight, which is rare, I mean, it's monastic Dharma talks. So that's been good. And we've got another 1,000 or so followers in Instagram and Facebook. So we reach a lot of people. Since 2022, Stillwater, working with other sanghas in Washington area and 9 other sanghas in other places, have been sponsoring something called Love in Action Ukraine. And it's this amazing project where we've connect through a OI member from this area who lives in the Czech Republic, connected with Czech nonprofits to deliver humanitarian aid to those suffering greatly because of the war. And these Czech nonprofits drive these, collect, buy diapers and milk for, dry milk for mothers and generators and whatever the people say they need, and drive them 1,000 miles to the front line. And it's been a great group. And just to say too, that as a Sangha, it's interesting. We give about 10% of our income to other nonprofits, including Thích Foundation, Equal Justice Initiative, and Shepherd's Table, which is a center for people without homes and others in need. And just to finally say, what's really important today, when I think of engaged practice, is addressing the despair of our time and creating safe places for people to talk about and transform their despair. And then aligning with other groups that also support. Stillwater it's working with other groups that support Stillwater's core values of mindfulness, compassion, and community. So that's what I have to say. Pop Lou, if you have more, and we'll take questions from others in the time we have left. And it's been fun.
Yeah. Well, I was remembering walking with you. I think it was maybe in 2007 at Blue Cliff when we had just opened that center, or 2009, I can't remember. And we were walking on the loop, I think, on the road there around Blue Cliff, and you said something that stuck with me for many years, which is that one of our monastics had left and was having difficulty and ended up going out, not being a monastic anymore. And you said, we really need to communicate to our young monastics that this is a service-oriented tradition, that without that aspiration as well. It's not where we just go and meditate and in a cave, as it were, and follow our breathing and get enlightenment, but we are really engaged. And I just want to appreciate the beautiful Stillwater Mindfulness Practice Center network that you've been one key member of growing, and just I see it as one of the great models of what is possible when we really build Sangha and we put our energy into that. So I just feel grateful for your path of service, Mitchell, and how you've just consistently helped, but also us as monastics to grow. I echo your expression at the beginning of being a public learner, a teacher as a public learner, because I feel like that's the essence of this series. I get to reach out to you and many others and spend this hour and a half together learning from what you're doing and really looking into that. So it helps us to grow as a monastic community and as a fourfold, multifold Sangha. So thank you.
And if anybody has questions, two things. If you have questions, please. And if you want these slides, just send me an email and I can send you the slide packet as a PDF as a PDF. And my email is very simple. It's joyfulnoodle@gmail.com. So are there any questions? I don't know. Sarah, is there a way to tag somebody or open it to somebody, or shall they just bow in? Mm-hmm.
Tara, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, you answered it, Mitchell, I think. If I wanted to be part of the Stillwater mindfulness practice, I'd just contact joyfulnoodle@gmail.com.
Not quite. You go to stillwatermpc.org, the website. It's a website that has a huge amount of information because we have all the announcements for the last 20 years indexed on it. So you can just search them. And then you'll learn about each of the groups, and then each of the groups has a contact person and a way to sign up to get the link. So yes, and we have people from all over.
Okay, so did you say go to the website Stillwater MPC?
mpc.org, Mindfulness Practice Center, MPC. Great. Mhm.
There's also a question in the chat from Rebecca. They ask, I've been thinking about joy and happiness and how they interconnect, and I'm curious if you could speak to how you define and think about the two concepts.
So what are the two words? There's a story from the Buddha that the I often told about how you're in the desert and thirsty, and you see the water, and you're feeling what he would say is joy within the anticipation, and then you get there and you're feeling happy. But I've read other translations where they use it, they flip it, and you're feeling happy when you see it and joyful when you get there. And Thai talks about true joy. So I think happy for me, I like Thai's use of true joy, that we get joyful a lot of things, but there's a real true joy, which is, throwing the water all over you is a good example of true joy. And, and happiness is for me a lesser, just a lesser, less strong emotion, and it fused up. But one of the things it raises, and as we practice, and it's really important that we get more specific about the names we use for our emotions and feelings, and that we don't assume everybody else knows what we're talking about. Because and it comes up a lot around anger, because people have very different senses of what anger means. For some, it's violent actions. For others, it's extreme frustration. And for others, it's righteous indignation, and so on. And so, if we're going to talk about anger, we have to specify which one we're talking about. So that's the best one. I mean, Brother Faplu, happiness and joy.
Yeah, I often use as well the same image of that Tai mentioned as you did as well, and I think that happiness has a more lasting quality. So we feel this kind of fulfillment, a whole kind of holistic thing. Joy is in the moment. If you feel a surge of joy, I think both are important, and they're positive qualities we can cultivate. And I think that I see that when I follow my joy, I do tend to find lasting happiness. So it's a good kind of compass, you could say. And so, I mean, coming to the Sangha and practicing brought me so much joy. And it was such a key moment in my own practice when I learned to follow my breathing and come back to my body in a moment when I was experiencing a lot of suffering in my early 20s. That kind of guiding light of cultivating joy within myself without having it to be dependent on things outside of me was so key. Was just absolutely essential. And at that moment, there wasn't what we might call happiness. Yeah, the happiness came slower and more through all the aspects, like the five, for example, the five actions that you mentioned, or through the practice of the mindfulness trainings, just creating this. I feel like joy gives you a direction, and then happiness is foundational, if that makes sense.
What you said too reminded me that one of my key moments on a retreat was realizing the difference between internal validation and external validation. And for me, happiness came a lot through external validation, when people approved of what I did. And I had to learn about internal validation. And those, as Ty says, these moments of joy that don't require anyone else. It just, I remember I had this love affair with an orange on a retreat. I mean, in the sense that it was such an amazing thing. I mean, it just was a joy to hold it and to merge with it. Anyone else with a question before we say goodbye? Jonathan.
Hello, thank you for having me. I think you had in the slide it was essentialism, and then the other one I forgot what it was called. But I think I've learned in my practice with Plum Village and reading Thay's book, Living Buddha, Living Christ, about how, kind of having interfaith dialogue between Christianity and Buddhism, as well as other religions. And so I spent the last year speaking to a lot of Christians, and we had a lot of agreements and influence each other, but there was times where a lot of them had essentialism as their main viewpoint. And it was really, I triggered a lot of them. And I was saying things that were coming from my Buddha nature, some really peaceful, loving things, but it triggered them. And it happened a bunch of times. And it was really shocking to me. And I was just wondering if there's any advice on handling, because it is the number one spiritual tradition of the West. So it's important, I think, to have those dialogues.
So it's essentialism and nominalism, and I'm by no means an expert on it, but there have been big issues in Western philosophy, especially through Christianity, which was very much an essentialist tradition. And what I found helpful with being with people I don't agree with is to ask questions. I mean, to just, sort of follow it through. Well, why do you believe that? And how does that work? And what happens when this happens? And just engage them without contradicting them, but sort of play it through and see, one, you're building up some positive connection with them. And which is going to help the dialogue. And you're showing interest in them, and you maybe are learning something along the way. And you may open them to looking at it a different way. Thank you, Jonathan.
I always like I was thinking of that quote. I think it's from Luke. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? So I think, there's some beautiful sayings in the gospel that, that speak to the present moment. And I think we can find a skillful way. I mean, there's the Buddha nature in the gospels too. So I think that can be a key to opening up your friend's heart.
And there's a whole bookcase now of literature on Christianity and Buddhism and who blended the two. And I saw in the quote that one of my favorite sayings from NVC of empathy before education, which is a really helpful way to think about talking to people. Oh, I know. I have a closing metta meditation. Should I do it now? Anything you want to say before I close this, Brother Faplu or Sarah?
Just so much gratitude for you taking this time today and preparing, Mitchell, and yeah, to helping us to establish this this rich tradition of engaged Buddhism in America and in the world. So thank you for your practice and your continual support of our big sangha around the world.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all you and others are doing at Deer Park and everywhere. And I want to close with this guided meditation, well, a metta meditation I learned from Bhante Gunaratana, who is a Sri Lankan monk who wrote Mindfulness in Plain English and a bunch of books. And like most metta meditations, you can do it with yourself and people around you, people who have you a slight connection with difficult people and all beings. But I'll just say you. Dear friends, may you be well, happy, and peaceful. May no difficulties come to you. May no problems come to you. May no harm come to you. May you always meet with success. And may you also have the patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome the inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures in life.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mitchell. Deer Park.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Mitchell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Mitchell.